Good afternoon. I want to begin with a simple observation about modern life. We have become, as a species, extraordinarily skilled at making things easier. We can order dinner without speaking to another human being. We can get directions without ever learning where we are. We can answer questions without opening a book. We can avoid boredom, avoid effort, and avoid awkward conversations. And increasingly, with artificial intelligence, avoid some of the more complex work of thinking itself. In many ways, it's a remarkable age to live in. Before you make any assumptions, I'm not here tonight to denounce technology or pretend that every innovation will place us on the precipice of human collapse. I use modern tools, you use modern tools, we all do. Frankly, I'm quite fond of indoor plumbing, and I'm not looking to reverse that to return to the outhouse. So the problem is not that convenience exists. The problem is that convenience has begun to take on a much larger role in our daily lives. It's no longer just a tool. It's becoming the ideal situation for many, a philosophy of comfort, a way of life without struggle. And when convenience becomes the organizing principle of life, human development most certainly suffers. That is especially true in children. Here's the reality. Children are not and have never been formed by ease and comfort. They are formed through challenge, through responsibility, through failure, through the slow and often uncomfortable process of learning difficult things. Children, in other words, are built through friction. And that friction is at the heart of what I call emergence. We do not become our best selves by accident. We certainly don't stumble into success. We emerge through a process of grappling with difficult and complex things. That is true intellectually, that is true socially, that is true emotionally, that is true ethically and physically. Now, what I am saying may sound obvious. In fact, much of what is most important in education and parenting does sound obvious. The difficulty is not that we don't know it. The difficulty is that we forget it at exactly the wrong moments. Because if it were obvious to us, why are so many children increasingly anxious, isolated, physically unwell, and unable to tolerate just a very little bit of ordinary discomfort? And why is it that so many adults feel the need to remove every obstacle from a child's path? As if the goal of parenting and education were to create a perfectly padded runway from birth to adulthood. At some point, we begin to confuse protecting children with preparing them. And those are not the same thing. Protecting matters, of course. Children need love, they need nurturing, they need adults who care deeply about them. But preparation requires something much more complex. Preparation requires that we not only ask, how do I help this child feel safe and secure? We also have to ask in that same moment, and how do we help this child become more capable later? Those are related questions, no doubt, but they're not identical. A child who never struggles may look successful. They may appear polished. They may say the right things and seem impressive at family gatherings. But if they have not developed the inner architecture to face complexity, then what exactly have we given them? We have given them opportunity without endurance, information without discernment. We've given them the ability to express themselves emotionally, but without self-control. And eventually, life has a habit of exposing that difference. Because life, rather rudely, does not care how carefully we curated someone's childhood. At some point, every human being must learn to do hard things, to wait, to fail, to cooperate with others, to carry responsibility without collapsing under it. And if someone never really learns those things when they're young, they do not magically acquire them later by opening up a productivity app or highlighting their calendar. In fact, one of the most unsettling features of adulthood how so many highly grown-looking people have never learned how to fail. They can be clever, articulate even, and completely and utterly undone by minor disappointment. They can be excellent at curating an identity and terrible at inhabiting one. They can tell you all about their personal brand and still be unable to return a difficult phone call. That is not maturity. That is branding with a Wi-Fi connection. So part of our task as parents and educators is to remember what development actually is. Development is not the avoidance of struggle. Development is the wise use of struggle by taking chances that might lead to failure. And that requires a fuller view of human intelligence. Unfortunately, we tend, especially in education, to overvalue a very narrow slice of intelligence, usually the kind that performs well on paper. You know, a child who can recall, process, test well, and produce. They are often lauded for their success. And don't get me wrong, intellectual development is part of our matrix of learning. But a flourishing human being requires much more than a sharpened mind. And that growth starts early. I'd like to tell you a little story. Every morning, I greet the students out in front of my school before they walk into school. On one particular morning, I was watching the crows. We have a number of crows on campus fly around. I was saying to another teacher how much I would enjoy it if I could train a crow to come and land on my shoulder to greet the children as they walked into school. And the children just continued to process in during the day, and I didn't give it much thought, and the next day I'd forgotten all about it. A young kindergarten walked up to me the next day. He said, "Dr. Strecker, I was thinking about what you said about the crow, and I have an idea if you'd like to hear it." And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Well, I was thinking if you had a crow friend, then I know you would take good care of it because you're very kind that way." So he had been thinking ethically about it. He said, "Also, it would make everyone really happy, and they would really enjoy having that crow sitting on your shoulder. It would be a great way to start the day." So he's thinking emotionally. Socially, he thought it would be a great community builder, something that we could rally around. And physically, he even said, and maybe at recess, they'd get so friendly with us, they'd come and play with us, and we could chase each other around. That's physical health, up and moving. And so he holds out his hand, and in his hand are two gems. And he said, "I brought these because I learned that crows really like to have shiny objects, and they will use them to trade with other crows or sometimes even humans. So I thought it would be a good way for you to attract the crows to you, maybe feed them and get closer and closer over time." Intellectual. Even a child as young as a kindergartner can begin to put the puzzle pieces together. It is our job to keep that natural curiosity, to keep that enthusiasm, and not have it washed away in the grand scheme of all the learning we do. So let's do a quick analysis on what each of these things are. Intellectual intelligence is the ability to think clearly, reason well, and engage complexity. For the child, that was the gems. Social intelligence is the capacity to cooperate, to communicate, listen deeply, interpret others, and function in a greater community. And that was when he talked about making friends with the birds. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand one's feelings without becoming hostage to them. The bird would make him and his friends happy. He loved animals. Ethical intelligence is the ability to discern right from wrong, to develop character, and to act with integrity even when no one is watching. We were helping nature. And physical intelligence is the discipline of inhabiting one's body well with effort, health, and stamina. The children could play at recess with the birds. These 5 intelligences are not optional extras that we just throw on. They're not decorative features to a well-rounded life. They are the very foundations of becoming fully human. And here's the crucial point. These intelligences, none of them, develop through comfort. Intellectual intelligence develops when a child has to wrestle with a difficult idea instead of immediately reaching for their phone to solve it. Social intelligence develops when we must navigate awkwardness, misunderstanding, and the challenge of dealing with people who are not exactly like them. And that, by the way, is still legal. Children are allowed to meet people who are mildly irritating. Emotional intelligence develops when they experience disappointment and discovers that other people have feelings that are real and important also. Ethical intelligence develops when they face choices, consequences, and obligations, and that quiet pressure to do the right thing, even when it is costly. I wish our politicians would learn that lesson. And physical intelligence develops through exertion, repetition, and the humbling realization that the body does not improve merely because we have a New Year's resolution. In each case, friction is not the impediment to their development. Friction is the mechanism by which they develop. Now, this is not a particularly fashionable idea these days. Our culture prefers the language of optimization, faster, easier, smarter. Nowadays, everything must be frictionless if it's pitched to us as valuable, something we can buy. And frictionless is a marvelous quality in certain things. If you're using a payment app to buy my book, well, I would prefer frictionless. If you're visiting the DMV, I am sure you would welcome less friction. And one of my personal favorites, when I am buying airline tickets, I would like at least one part of that process not to feel like a moral trial. And at my size, a physical space test. Frictionless has its place, but frictionless is a terrible philosophy of human development. Because if you remove all friction from a child's life, you also remove the conditions under which strength is formed. It's a bit like going to a gym where all the weights are replaced by decorative pillows. Those people using those pillows will feel encouraged. They will feel accomplished. Heck, it might even make for a great selfie. But under those circumstances, they will not get stronger. And I worry that in many parts of our culture, we are handing children metaphorical pillows and calling it preparation. We have a tendency to smooth every path. We intervene in every conflict. We rescue too quickly. And then sometime later, we are shocked to discover that many young people feel fragile in a world that requires resilience. Well, of course they do. If adults are constantly sending the message, any significant difficulty is a problem to be removed from their lives, children will understandably conclude that difficulty itself is abnormal. And then when life does what life always does, when it confuses them, frustrates them, embarrasses them, they don't think, wow, this is hard, I'll work through it. They think something has gone terribly wrong. But often, nothing has gone wrong. Often, something incredibly important is happening in that very moment. A child is learning patience. A student is learning perseverance. A teenager is learning that discomfort is survivable. These are profound lessons. This is why schools and parents need to recover confidence. Not harshness, not indifference, not coldness, confidence. Let me explain. It's the confidence to say, yes, this is difficult. Yes, I know you're frustrated. Yes, I am here for you. And no, I'm not going to remove this challenge for you because my job is not merely to comfort you in this moment. My job is also to help you become capable so you can handle it on your own later. That is love with a long horizon, and children desperately need that. One last thing. Now, in the age of AI, as artificial intelligence becomes more powerful, the question is no longer what can the machines do. I think in many ways we don't know exactly. but we know they're getting more powerful. The more important question today is, what kind of humans are we becoming? Our task is not to simply use AI as a pathway to comfort, but instead to cultivate wisdom, reaching the pinnacle of each intelligence. If more and more of life can be automated, then the central challenge of education is not preparing children to use these inevitable conveniences. It's preparing them for personal agency, for discernment, for connection, for empathy, for judgment, the ability to act meaningfully in a world full of shortcuts. I am not anti-technology, but I am deeply concerned about the abundance of comfort this world will soon provide. And comfort can wear very modern clothes. It can look efficient. It can look compassionate. It can be wrapped in the language of innovation. But if it weakens our children's ability to think, feel, choose, and endure, then whatever else it's doing, it's not helping our children become their best selves. And this has implications not only for parenting and education, but for culture itself. If we want a generation capable of using AI well, then we must become far more intentional about forming the kinds of human beings AI cannot replace. That, to me, is centered around these 5 intelligences and emergence. Thank you.